really appreciate it. I'm really excited to share my talk with you and meet any of you I haven't met. And before I get into that, I just wanted to sort of set the scene a little bit. So my title is Field and Data Technician. So in short, I specialize in all things water data. So I'm in the field, helping us collect different kinds of data in the lab, analyzing water samples, and on the computer working on data analysis, data release, maps, graphs, and creating all those regional reports that you have. Yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here and be part of it. And I've always been drawn to water, and so I'm really thankful that I get to do that kind of work here. And so in my talk, I'm going to speak about the lake and the challenges, sort of set up the scene, and talk about the program, and then I'll talk about the release of the 2023 data and some next steps, and I'll pass it along. Okay. So just like how our data comes from so many different parts of the watershed, everyone here has their own unique perspective and experience with the lake and the watershed, so I just wanted to remember this as some facts about the lake. So Lake Winnipeg is the 10th largest freshwater lake in the world, as a watershed spanning 100 indigenous nations and about 7 million people, and more than 23,000 current residents live in 30 communities along the shores of the lake, including 11 First Nations. And Lake Winnipeg, like many large lakes, sustains vital ecological biodiversity, local economies and livelihoods, as well as cultural and spiritual identity. And over the last 30 years or so, Lake Winnipeg's health has declined substantially. So in particular, algal blooms have become more frequent, severe, and extensive, as many of you know. And the impacts of these blooms have environmental, health, and economic implications. But the water quality issues aren't just unique to this lake, but the system is particularly important due to the size of the watershed and how many water bodies are upstream. And we know that algal blooms have become more of an issue in the lake, in large part due to excessive phosphorus loading. So simply put, phosphorus reduction is a widely recognized solution to controlling algal blooms in freshwater lakes, and multi-decadal whole ecosystem research at IASD's experimental lakes area has shown the importance of phosphorus as a limiting factor for algal blooms in freshwater lakes. And I won't go into too much more detail on that for now, but Dr. Scott Higgins is going to speak a little bit more about this later on. And since the watershed is so extensive, it's really important that we get a better understanding of where the phosphorus is coming from. So while federal and provincial data speaks to the contribution of phosphorus from some of the larger tributaries of the lake, like for example, we know that historically the Red River has contributed more phosphorus than some of the other tributaries to the lake. If we're going to effectively target remedial action, it's really critical that we understand as fine a resolution as possible where the phosphorus is coming from. And so this is where we come in, and this is where we started the Lake Winnipeg Community-Based Monitoring Program in 2016. So this program is designed to answer that question of where the phosphorus is coming from. And with this program, we want to generate useful information that can respond to community concerns, support regional decision making, support research, and be used to target remedial action. So our program, as many of you know, mobilizes regional partners and passionate volunteers, many of whom are in this room, to collect water samples all across Manitoba. And our methods have been developed and refined in partnership with our science advisors, 3 in particular, who have played key roles in this process, who are all here today. Mike Steen, an analytical chemist from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, who developed the sampling and lab analysis protocols. Dr. Greg McCullough, a research scientist at the University of Manitoba, who developed our data analysis protocols and site selection process. And Dr. Nora Caston, our Canada Research Chair and Associate Professor at Winnipeg, whose water quality lab we analyze our water samples in and who advises us on data interpretation. But it would take more time than I have today to describe how all of our science advisors and partners have made this program what it is today. And I also just wanted to kind of give a brief refresher on how sampling works if anybody is unfamiliar. So we have a weighted sampling device, lower to collect integrated and representative water samples from the water column, and following this we are able to get a whole water sample and a filtered water sample. But like with most things I'm saying here, you can find a lot more information in our mission reports. And so, yeah, with the whole water samples we can calculate total phosphorus, and with the filtered samples we can calculate dissolved phosphorus. So here's a map showing the location of all our sampling sites in 2023. And so with all our partners and volunteers who live and work near these locations, it really makes it possible for us to have frequent and responsive sampling across the large area in a way that you couldn't if you were just trying to use one central spot. And 80 of these stations, all the green dots on the map, are at Water Survey of Canada's flow meter stations. And so this means that we can track real-time flow data and prompt our samplers and help them know when is a good time to take a sample. But it also means it's possible for us to couple that stream flow data with phosphorus concentration data and calculate loads and exports. So phosphorus load is just the amount of phosphorus flowing past a site in a year, and phosphorus export is the amount exported by each hectare of land in a given year. And so this is what we use for our hotspot maps. And when I mean phosphorus hotspots, that's the number that we're referring to. And the great thing about that is it means we can compare between watersheds that are different sizes. And I wanted to take some time to speak about lab method quality. So our water samples are analyzed for phosphorus concentration following EPA guidelines so that our data set is interoperable with other data sets. And we've also been regularly conducting proficiency testing with PT Canada. So we've been passing with excellent scores since November 2023. And in 2023, we also, with the 2023 data, we calculated the limit of detection. So this just helps us understand when our results become uncertain, so below a certain threshold. And we've also been looking at the dissolved phosphorus in 2023. So the lab methods are the same, it's just done on the whole water sample versus the filtered water sample in the field. And understanding how much phosphorus is in dissolved form helps us understand how phosphorus is moving from the landscape to the water. So, for example, we might see that at some sites there's a smaller fraction of dissolved during spring, which would suggest that there's more phosphorus in particulate form being exported at that time. I also wanted to take some time to speak about the importance of snowmelt. So, as many of you know, when you're doing water research in this region, spring snowmelt is often the time that's most important. Because not only is this the time when most of the highest flows occur, but the transit of water over these primarily flat and partially frozen soils can mobilize large amounts of phosphorus into the waterways. And in our analysis reports, sometimes we identify sites as having insufficient data. And generally what this means is that we feel like we don't have enough samples during peak flow events. So for example, here is a hydrograph. So the blue line is the daily flow, and above each point is the either total or dissolved phosphorus taken in each day. So this is a really great hydrograph where we've got some samples and a lot of samples during that spring snowmelt period. But if we didn't have data there, for example, we would be potentially underestimating or overestimating, depends on the site, what's the actual amount of phosphorus flowing past that site in a given year is. So it reduces our ability to understand what's going on in this situation and to fragment the long-term records that we've been working for. And so all this to say between the sampling protocol, the lab methods, and the data analysis methods, quality and usefulness of our data. And so with that, now I'm going to talk about the actual 2023 data. It was a moderately to severely dry year. I use that word, that phrasing, because it depends kind of where you are. It's such a big area that depends. I also just wanted to point out, when you look at these maps, the first thing you might look at is some of these bigger watersheds. And so while these are still important to understand, it's important to remember that some smaller hotspots contained within that area could be missed. So that's where we're always trying to improve the resolution of our data set. But yeah, as we expect with drier years, when there's less water moving across the landscape, there should be less phosphorus entering the waterways. So this year wasn't as dry as some of the years like 2021, but there were still a few smaller hotspots. And so generally what we see, and with previous years of data, is that most of the sites in and around the Red River Valley are where we see hotspots, and that's generally what we're seeing in this year too. And two of the highest sites on the left, Rose Isle Creek near Rose Isle, and on the bottom, actually I'll use the pointer. Is this the word? It's not showing. It did show. I just can't see it more. The left one is Rose up here near Rose Isle, and the bottom is right here on the right near Christie. And these were actually both hotspots in 2022, which was a wet year, so that wasn't super surprising. I think the main thing with this, with long-term monitoring, is just knowing that, especially in this region, with all these different factors, whether that's how the waterways are shifting, how the land use is changing, how the climate's changing, how regional weather can be, each year is really a different story. And so it's really important that we have these long-term records. And with this program and looking at these other years, so these 2020, 2021, and 2023 are all kind of drier years. 2022 is a wetter year. And if you just looked at one of these years, that's all the data that you had, it would just be a snapshot, right? So we're always trying to work towards that long-term record. And identify persistent hotspots, new hotspots. And the other thing that's really important is that the goal of this is to improve health of the lake. And so if we're going to target this remedial action, we want to know that it's actually having an impact. So being able to monitor and see whether sites that are hotspots are becoming less of a hotspot over time too. And finally, I just wanted to mention that we've obviously put the reports out, but I also just uploaded the 2023 data to DataStream. So thank you to our partner DataStream. All of it's publicly available and pretty easy to find too. But if you have any questions, just let me know. And then I'll just really talk about some sort of next steps. So first, the 10th field season is rapidly upon us, and Fallon's going to be speaking about this more in her talk. And later this spring, I'll be headed back to the lab to analyze 2024 samples. And then following that, of course, working on all the data analysis, calculations, and report generation. We also plan to go back and reanalyze any previous years where we were using the real-time flow data versus the approved historical flow data. And also updates the older maps, because we changed formats with 2020. So being able to look at all of the years in the same format is something we want to be able to do as well. Finally, I just wanted to personally say thank you to everyone for being part of the program. It's really cool for me to just meet a lot of you that I haven't met before. I'm kind of behind the scenes a lot on all this stuff, so I appreciate you coming out and making the work that we do possible. And yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share, please come and talk to me. I'll be around this holiday. So yeah, with that, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Karl. Thank you to everyone for being here today. It's so great to see so many familiar faces in one place. I'm Chelsea, I'm the Programs Director at the Lake Winnipeg Foundation, and I'm going to be talking about how the data is being used to inform management and decision-making processes. So as you probably saw from Karl's presentation, a lot of work goes into this network and the data that's being collected from the volunteers and partners who collect the samples, the data analysis and report generation that Karl does, the science advisor input and oversight, as well as the network communication and engagement that you'll hear more about from Fallon. We are certainly not coordinating this effort for this data to sit on someone's computer in an Excel spreadsheet. It's really important to us that this data is used in decision-making processes and that we facilitate that process to the best of our ability. So with that in mind, we developed the data to impact cycle, which demonstrates how our data can have an impact on phosphorus loading to Lake Winnipeg. So the data to impact cycle, which you can find in our policy brief at the materials table, demonstrates how frequent and responsive sampling can lead to the identification of phosphorus hotspots. And when resources and remedial action are targeted to the hotspots and phosphorus reduction impacts are measured, we can begin to see an impact on phosphorus loading to Lake Winnipeg. And now that we have successfully identified phosphorus hotspots in the watershed, we focused our efforts on targeting action to these hotspots. So for example, the federal Lake Winnipeg Basin Program is a program that funds on-the-ground implementation of phosphorus reduction projects. And the monitoring network was actually designed with this program in mind as a place where our data could be used to inform more targeted action. In 2023, the federal government committed $650 million for 10 years to the Freshwater Action Plan, which includes the Lake Winnipeg Basin Program. And we were really excited that they also committed to implementing a more targeted approach to their funding by March 2027. So the federal government has set this goal, and we have the data to support that. So we've been working to share our data with as many people at the federal government as possible. For example, we've been sharing it with the program managers at the Lake Winnipeg Basin Program, and participating in their stakeholder working group to taking a more targeted approach. We've been sharing it with technical staff and research scientists at Agriculture and Leaders in Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada. And we even shared it with the federal minister, Stephen Guilbeault, when he was in Winnipeg for the launch of the Canada Water Agency. Another way that action is being targeted to hotspots is through research. So for example, doctors Darshani Kumaragamage, Nora Casson, and Inoka Amarakun, Inoka and Nora are here today. These researchers used our hotspot data to target their field activities to phosphorus hotspots. And in this case, it was the Manning Canal watershed, which is a persistent hotspot in the Seine River watershed. And I'm sure Nora will speak more about that research in her presentation this afternoon. Our data has also been used to inform and calibrate watershed models. In some cases, our data is used as an input to the model, and in other cases, our data is used as a way to ground truth the data coming out of the model. And this afternoon, Thomas will go into more detail about how our data is being used specifically in IISD's Prairie Watershed Analytics project. So we've now started to have a little bit of a collection of research papers that reference community-based or our community-based monitoring data, which is really great, and we hope to continue to see this library grow. One example here, just to show how our data is referenced. This is from the same research group, Nora, Darshani, and Inoka. And it's in the materials and methods section when they describe the site and soil description. So it says 2 agricultural fields that are susceptible to flooding during the snowmelt period were selected from phosphorus hotspots, land areas that release disproportionate amounts of phosphorus to Lake Winnipeg. And they were identified using the Lake Winnipeg community-based monitoring And this is really great to see because it's important that phosphorus runoff research is happening in areas where it can have the greatest impact, which is phosphorus hotspots. So when you see a map of the hotspots and notice where the reoccurring phosphorus hotspots are occurring, the obvious next question is what's going on in those areas and what can we do about them? So our data tells us where phosphorus is coming from in the watershed, but not why the phosphorus exports are high in certain areas. So our next step is to combine our phosphorus export data with land use data to try to identify correlations between what's happening on the land and what's happening in the water. When we were doing this is Karl and I have teamed up with our science advisor, Greg McCullough, to do a spatial correlation study using our phosphorus export data. So right now we're in the data gathering phase, finding the best data sources of different phosphorus contributing activities like synthetic fertilizers and wastewater contributions. The data on the map here shows the number of manure management plans by township. And you can see that there's a high density of manure management plans in areas where we have recurring phosphorus hotspots. So it was important to us that this paper included data on livestock and manure spreading in the watershed. So we were quite pleased after submitting a Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, or FIPA, request for manure management plan data from the province, and we've received this data now, and it's specifically the amount of manure spread by species in each watershed and the amount of animal units by species for each watershed in our study. And in looking at the manure management plan regulations and data online, we came across what the manure management regulations call certain areas. And this was interesting to us because the map shows our watershed boundaries overlaid with the certain areas. And my understanding is that certain areas are two municipalities, Hanover and Lobson, where the amount of phosphorus in the manure produced is greater than 2 times the annual crop removal rate. So the province recognizes that there's this phosphorus being applied in these areas, or more phosphorus being applied in these areas than the potential for crop removal. And these municipalities line up quite closely with some of our persistent phosphorus hotspots in the same river, including the Manning Canal watershed.
The Manning Canal is this site here.
And the Manning Canal has popped up as a phosphorus hotspot in all the wet years since the program has begun in 2016. So first of all, I know that these maps are different and it's kind of hard to look at. The 2016 to 2019 is our old map style, and then as Karl showed, 2020 to 2022 is our new map style. And this year we plan to get all of our maps into the same format, which will be great. But the message is the same. Red means higher phosphorus exports and phosphorus hotspots. And you can see that since the program began in 2016, in all of these wet years,
the Manning Canal has popped up as a red hotspot.
So it's definitely a place to focus our efforts and try to understand what's going on. Another line of evidence that has pointed us towards the recurring phosphorus hotspots on the eastern side of the Red River Valley is the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Environmental Indicator Maps. So this map, this is the map of our watershed boundaries again, overlaid with phosphorus balance, which is the annual phosphorus added as a function of manure and synthetic fertilizers, minus the phosphorus being removed from crop removal. And a high phosphorus balance means that there's a greater risk of phosphorus building up over time and being available to run off the land and into our waterways. And you can see, again, that the southeastern portion of the province has a high phosphorus balance. And the western side, where we have seen some phosphorus hotspots pop up in more recent years, has a moderate phosphorus balance. So we aren't the only one noticing these spatial trends in phosphorus in the watershed, and we look forward to working with the province and the federal government to better understand what's going on in these areas so we can begin to have an impact. A new piece of data to our program that helps us better understand phosphorus sources is the dissolved and particulate data that Karl spoke about. So as he mentioned, we measure dissolved phosphorus. That's the sample that's filtered at the site, and we can infer particulate phosphorus by subtracting dissolved phosphorus from total phosphorus. And we know that the type of phosphorus dominating the stream, when we know the type of phosphorus dominating the stream, we can start to think about what those sources of that phosphorus might be. So for example, dissolved phosphorus typically comes from sources like sewage, manure, and synthetic fertilizers, where particulate phosphorus is more likely to come from sources like soil erosion. And we hope that this data is also useful to watershed districts in their project planning, because beneficial management practices can be different depending on the type of phosphorus that you're looking to target. And looking at one of our persistent phosphorus hotspots, the Manning Canal again, we can see that during the spring melt, which is the major flow peak on the bottom there, the total and dissolved phosphorus lines match up nearly perfectly. And they separate later in the season, which would mean there's more particulate later in the season, but the water flow is so low that that's likely not contributing very much to the phosphorus load. So for the Manning Canal, of the annual phosphorus load, 92% of that load is dissolved phosphorus. And this is pretty much what we would expect from this site. The land in the Manning Canal is very flat, and so in those flat areas, when water sits on the land, it tends to steep like tea and pull phosphorus in dissolved form out from the sediments. And that's likely what's happening in the Manning Canal here. And I've been really curious to look at the dissolved versus particulate data for a site in the Pembina River Valley, the Pembina River near Windy Gates.
I'm just going to point it out on the map here. It popped up in 2017 and 2022 as a phosphorus hotspot. And we've heard anecdotally from, I'll maybe repeat that, it was a hotspot in 2017 and 2022. And we've heard anecdotally from the people that sample at those sites, or at that site, that it's really difficult to sample. So in my mind, I've had this idea that it will have higher particulate phosphorus, and I'm looking forward to seeing if it does. So what did we find? It wasn't quite as dramatic as I was expecting, but this hydra does look very different than the Manning Canal. You can see that especially during the spring melt period, there is more particulate. And opposite to the Manning Canal later in the season, they actually come together. But again, the flow is basically zero at that time, so it wouldn't be contributing very much to the annual phosphorus load. Another interesting thing is that you can see when the total phosphorus kind of bumps up there right at the peak, there isn't a corresponding bump in dissolved phosphorus. So that extra boost likely comes from particulate phosphorus. And at that peak flow moment, it's almost 50% particulate phosphorus, which might not seem like a lot, but relative to other sites in the Red River Valley and in this region, that's actually quite high particulate phosphorus loading. So it was interesting that our anecdotes were potentially true. But as Karl said, 2023 was a really dry year, and so it'll be interesting to see how these relationships between particulate and dissolved change in wetter years when there's potentially higher phosphorus loading at these sites. So you can see the 2023 data on the right there. The peak flow was around 100 cubic meters per second, and in 2022, which was a wetter year, peak flow was around 300 cubic meters per second. So those are very different years, and we'll look forward to having this dissolved particulate data going forward to see how it changes. So the value of the community-based monitoring network was also highlighted when it comes to understanding how phosphorus loading is impacted by climate change. So climate models predict that we will have wetter falls, warmer summers, and that weather patterns will be overall less predictable.
And this is what we saw in 2019 when a fall flood came to Manitoba. It was the first year where the floodway had to be opened during the fall season. And it was really great that we had volunteers and partners who had their sample packs and were able to collect samples during that time. And now we have data on what a fall flood does to phosphorus loading. And 2024, which we don't have that data yet, but it'll be available later this year, we saw a similar instance where there was a very localized rain event in the southeastern portion of the province that caused flooding in and around Steinbach, and our volunteer Ken took this photo, and we're glad that he was there on the ground, able to sample. So we'll be able to compare these two different situations of fall floods that occurred, and now we'll have data on how these different weather patterns will impact phosphorus loading going into the future. When Alexis, the executive director, saw this photo, she made the joke, now that's particulate phosphorus. It's a hay bale that was picked up from the rapidly raising water and brought downstream. Only this crowd would laugh at that. No offense. So not only is the data that we're generating useful to the net, not only is the data we're generating useful, but the network that we're building has also been useful to other researchers looking to analyze other endpoints, I guess. So for example, the last 4 years, we've been partnering with Braden from the U of M on this PhD project where he added a vial to measure salinity from the sample packs. And so through our network of on-the-ground volunteers and partners who are collecting samples, he was able to get thousands of samples for his PhD project and gain a better understanding of salinity across southern Manitoba. And we're excited to have Braden presenting later today on this research and what he's been finding. Something that will be a little bit different about the program this next year is that we made the decision to stop sampling at the Manitoba Hydro and Ontario Power generating stations. And there's a few things that led to this decision, but the main reason is that the concentrations on the Winnipeg River are really low. Nearly all the concentrations are near or below the limit of detection that Karl talked about earlier. And these really low concentrations, coupled with the very high flows that are seen on the Winnipeg River, meant that there was a lot of room for inflating the phosphorus load and export, because even a small error in the concentration could result in a really big change in the phosphorus load. And with concentrations being so low at these sites, and being so close or below our detection limit, there was even greater uncertainty in what those concentrations were. So along with not continuing to sample at these dams in the future, all the years of data from the generating stations has been removed from DataStream and the regional reports. Ultimately, we just didn't feel right about sharing data that we weren't completely confident in, but we are grateful to still have Manitoba Hydro as a funding partner to the Lake Winnipeg Community-Based Monitoring Network, and that hasn't changed with this change in sampling activities. Now, I wanted to finish off on a bit of a more positive note by sharing that this program isn't only having an impact on our own watershed, but also in other jurisdictions as well. So in 2021, the Ottawa River Keeper, which is an environmental nonprofit out east, reached out to us because they were interested in starting a community-based phosphorus monitoring program. So we met quite a few times over a few months, shared our sampling, lab analysis, and data analysis protocols. And they've now been running this program on the Ottawa River since 2021, now sampling at about 50 sites on the river and in the watershed. And it's just been really cool to connect with people doing similar work to address eutrophication in other jurisdictions in Canada. And with that, I will end it here and pass it over to Fallon, who's going to be talking about our 10th field season and engaging volunteers and partners. And if you have any questions, we'll be doing questions at the end. Thanks.
Hi, I'm I'm Fallon, I'm the program coordinator here at the Lake Winnipeg Foundation. You may not know me, but I'm sure I know most of the people in this room. I help coordinate the monitoring network from recruiting volunteers to training them, and I work at building and keeping an engaged network. I'm really excited to launch our 10th field season here with everyone today. We've got a really great day ahead, and I can't wait to share how far we've come and some of the exciting updates for the upcoming field season. So with this being our 10th field season, it only seems fitting to look back and share a little bit about our story, where we started, where we've gone, and where we are. So Mike Staten and Dr. Ray McCullough saw the need for higher resolution data on responsive phosphorus sampling in the watershed. And they thought, who better to do this than sampling partners and community volunteers who live and work in these areas. So this is what's led to the creation of the Lake Winnipeg Community-Based Monitoring Network. A small pilot project back in 2016 has turned into a major effort across the province 10 years later. It truly is a testament to the power of collaboration and community. So back in 2016, we started off with 2 watershed district partners, back when they were conservation districts, which was Red Point and St. Rosa. We had 9 sampling sites and we collected 200 samples. And we can flash forward to last year, which was our 9th field season, and we are now partnered with 12 watershed districts. We had 122 sampling sites, and we collected well over 2,500 samples. And here's a little visual of where we started. So the first photo was our initial weighted sampling device that was developed and constructed by Mike. And then later in 2017, when the program started to expand, Mike then perfected this sampler to be distributed across the network, and that's that second photo there, the one that most of you are familiar with. And as we begin celebrating being in our 10th field season, we can look back at some of our milestones that we've had throughout the years. So one of our greatest successes has been our partnerships with watershed districts. So when the program was first launched in 2016, I mentioned Red Point and St. Rosa were our partners, and they played a really key role in helping us complete that first field season. And their support helped kind of set that stage for what has become such a strong and collaborative effort. And as the program has expanded, now in 2025, we can say that we're partnering with 12 watershed districts, being Swan Lake, Central Assiniboine, Northeast Red, Intermountain, West Interlake, East Interlake, Pembina Valley, Souris, Whitemud, and Assiniboine West Watershed District. All of whose partnerships and commitment to our program are really, really valuable. Another really big moment for us was bringing on volunteers. They're another incredibly important part of the work that we do. So kind of when reflecting on these accomplishments, that was one that we took a bit of a pause on. So pictured here is Danica, who was brought on as a volunteer back in 2017, and who is now the manager for the Northeast Red Watershed District, who we get to partner with in another way. And she was also in her first professional photo shoot, which was a really great way for us to visually share what the program was with others. And then in 2019, we partnered with DataStream, becoming one of the regional partners. Together, we launched Lake Winnipeg DataStream, which is a region-specific database designed to address some of those data gaps happening around Lake Winnipeg. And in 2021, we launched our Sampling Sites newsletter, which kind of changed the way that we communicated about LWCBMN with volunteers and partners. And it's just a great way to kind of keep connected and keep people engaged in what we're doing and share those updates. In 2021, we began our lab partnership with Dr. Markasson, as Karl mentioned. And also, as Karl mentioned, in 2023, that is when we introduced the proficiency testing into our lab analysis. And lastly, just with the growth of LWCBMN over the years, we've had to increase our team to meet the increasing needs of the network, which is an accomplishment in itself. So that consists of 3 full-time staff members, which is Chelsea, Karl, and myself, as well as 3 seasonal student positions, 2 in the winter and 1 in the summer. Everything on the screen here are just all really great accomplishments that we're so proud to be able to look back on over the last 10 years. And I'd also like to now highlight some of the great partnerships that we've been able to develop, again, over the past 10 years. So as I mentioned in one of the milestones, watershed districts are vital partners and really integral to our monitoring efforts. They provide invaluable local expertise and a deeper understanding of what's occurring in the regions. Their contributions are key at making our monitoring efforts more effective and better aligned with what's really going on in these areas. Thanks to these partnerships, we've been able to expand our program across the province, and these districts act as key on-the-ground resources, making it possible for us to broaden our reach and our impact. They fostered really strong community connections, relationships, connecting us with the right people, and helping us spread the word about the program. They even helped us recruit volunteers. They act as a sample drop-off hub for people for sample drop-offs and pickups for all of our volunteers, and have just supported us in ways that have made a significant difference. And we're just incredibly grateful for their ongoing support. And then in addition to all of that, and their local knowledge and community connections, watershed districts actively support our data collection efforts. So their staff frequently take time out of their busy schedule to go collect samples at key sites, and they take time to train summer staff on our sampling protocols. So this hands-on involvement is really essential to the success of the program, and we truly can't thank them enough for their continued dedication. I'd also like to highlight the important partnership that we built with Swan Lake First Nation. So Swan Lake First Nation has been a sampling partner of the network for the last 2 years, collecting samples at Swan Lake. And we really value their support as a sampling partner, but we also want to ensure that the data is shared with the government in a way that feeds into their land and water decision-making processes. We aim to generate a tailored report for Swan Lake First Nation that includes all LWCBMN sites that overlap with their territory. And we also aim to build relationships with other Indigenous communities and governments as well. Again, sharing our data in tailored reports so it can be used in land and water decision-making processes. And a big part of our success also comes from the educational partnerships that we've developed. So Assiniboine Community College is one of them. Every year we go up to Brandon to teach the students about water quality monitoring, and we teach them our sampling protocol. This hands-on experience is coordinated through one of our volunteers, James Hood, and we provide students with real-world learning opportunities and introduce them to a field protocol that they can then apply in the future. We've also partnered with the Exchange Met School here in Winnipeg, so they're a project-based and community-focused learning school. The students are currently constructing our weighted sampling devices, giving them a chance to do a real-world project, and this partnership strengthens their practical skills while also supporting our program. And then looking ahead, we're teaming up with Pembina Valley Watershed District for the Borderland School Division Outdoor Education Day, and we'll be teaching students about the importance of water quality and leading them through a little hands-on water sampling activity, and just really getting them excited about interacting with the environment. It's an exciting opportunity to inspire and engage the next generation. So our continued success kind of depends on all the invaluable partnerships that I've mentioned, and together we're making a lasting impact. And we look forward to building more partnerships as we move forward in the next 10 years. And as I mentioned earlier, volunteers and sampling partners are really at the heart of everything that we do. We truly thrive because of their incredible contribution. We have over 55 dedicated volunteers and 13 sampling partners. So I thought it would be fun if we take a quick minute to just kind of recognize the strength of our network. So if you're one of our volunteers, could you please raise your hand? And if you're one of our sampling partners, could you please raise your hand? Watershed districts, all that. So it's really fun to see everybody in one room. And if we could give everybody a round of applause. So our work would not and could not be possible without each and every one of you. Your hard work and commitment and participation truly make a difference. So changing gears a little bit, there's a couple things to note heading into this field season. Last year we completed a good chunk of field audits, and this year I'd like to complete another good chunk of field audits. These audits are essential to ensure data accuracy and that we're maintaining a really high standard throughout our sampling efforts. So by conducting thorough audits, we can address any discrepancies early on, ensuring that the final data is reliable and representative of the samples that are being collected. We're also putting an effort to return to an annual calendar. As Karl mentioned, or maybe Alexis mentioned going forward, that at this annual LWCBMN gathering, we'd like to release the previous year's data and regional reports. So in order to do this, we'll be adjusting our schedule for earlier sample pickups. And with that kind of earlier collection schedule, we can analyze samples and generate reports ahead of the next field season. So what this really means is you'll probably just be hearing from me a little sooner than normal once the field season wraps up. We have also implemented a new internal system to better track water flow through a field season. And this system will allow us to more efficiently track changes and just enable us with the ability to track flow quicker than we've been able to in the past. And that means that then we can send out notifications to volunteers and sampling partners just to keep them informed of the changes that are going on at their site in terms of flow, and better equip them to be able to head out and collect samples when necessary. And a quick update on the salinity study. As Chelsea mentioned, 2024 marked the final year for this study, so that means that there will be no salinity kits in your sample packs this year, and we're also giving out new protocol sheets and sampling checklists to reflect this. But again, don't worry, Grady's here, and he will present later today, so we'll have many more details to share. I'd also like to introduce our winter co-op students. So you met them at the registration table, but the first photo here is Colette, and the second photo here is Madison. They've been working really hard behind the scenes, preparing sample packs, recruiting volunteers, delivering kits and training sessions, and their efforts have just been really crucial in helping us roll out this field season. And once the melt begins, they will begin sampling out in the western portion of the Red River Valley. So be sure to say hi to them again, and they'll be up at the registration table. I'm sure they'd love to chat. And just some updates for our newsletter, Sample Insights. It's kind of your one-stop resource for all things LWCBMN. You can find the latest program updates, data releases. We do volunteer and partner highlights, which is a really fun way to kind of engage with other people in the network through the newsletter. And just other fun things will be in there throughout the field season. We're going to be doing more DataStream challenges this year, so those are a fun way where you can interact with our data for a chance to win some prizes. And it's also where we promote our annual photo contest. So all of these photos up here are from winning photos from last year's photo contest, and they're all taken by volunteers at their sampling sites. These photos are actually on your name tags today, so not only will you see who you're connecting with, but you'll also get a little glimpse into last year's winning shots. We have a couple more 10th field season theme segments this year, so stay tuned. And if you don't receive our newsletter but would like to, you can come find me later or shoot me an email. I'd love to get you connected with us. And just to mention, we have a couple sites that still need volunteers for this season. So if you know anybody who lives in these areas, please help us spread the word. We've been actively recruiting, posting online groups, and reaching out to local businesses, but every little bit helps. You can also find these locations in your folder. There was a small handout for everyone to take a look at, want to take with you, or pass along to someone who may be interested in the opportunity. And in terms of other opportunities, we are hiring, we're looking for a summer student to join the team. They'll be helping with field audits and data collection, various volunteer and partner support. They'll be supporting Karl with his field work. So if you know anybody who would be a great fit, please encourage them to apply. I started out at LWF in a student position, so I can see firsthand, of course, with some really good experience. And okay, moving on to fun 10th field season things. This design you might have seen around today on your tote bags or on some stickers, and it was made specifically for this year. So we put them on tote bags and stickers as a thank you for all of your hard work and support. You should have received one when you registered, and if not, you can find myself or Madison Collette or any LWF staff member, and we will help you get a tote bag. We've also gotten on some mugs, so a little bit of like for our 3CBM bingo winners, you might get a mug if you win. So that's drawn at the end of the day today. So be sure to fill out your card and get them in for a chance to win. And there'll be more chances throughout the season, throughout sampling sites. Maybe keep an eye out on those DataStream challenges if you're interested. But yeah, thank you all so much. None of this would be possible without your support and participation. Thank you to our volunteers, partners, supporters, and our funders. Together, we can try and make this field season the best one yet.